So my name is David Phillips. I'm a photochemist. I'm currently Professor Emeritus in Imperial College, London, where I went after I had spent 10 years here in the Royal Institution as Wolfson Professor of Natural Philosophy and then Deputy Director. I first knew about the RI because of the Christmas lectures, but also because of George Porter's research, and I ran a small research group in photochemistry in Southampton. I used to bring my students up here to the Friday morning group discussions that they used to have. So I got to know George through that. And when the opportunity came for me to move up, of course I welcomed it. And he, knowing my interest in lecturing to school children particularly, gave me, as soon as I came here, the full responsibility for running the school's program, which I found both challenging and very, very interesting to do. And one of the achievements I think I made here was to introduce primary school lectures, which had not existed before. And that was because I believe that you need to get children at a very young age. And so from the age 7, they could come here and be entertained. And that proved to be hugely popular. Yes, that was interesting. We overlapped for about 5 years when George was then elected to be President of the Royal Society, and at which point he moved, and that was unexpected. It was expected he would be here for a number of years beyond that. And he had always planned that I would give the Christmas lectures myself in about 1987, 88. But he was replaced by John Morrig Thomas, and John wanted to give the Christmas lectures himself. And so as a compromise, we did them jointly. It was a combination of subjects, crystals and lasers, which possibly didn't sit naturally together, although I think we made it work. So we gave 6 lectures. John and I gave a joint lecture to start with. Then he gave 2 on his own, I gave 2 on my own, and then we had a joint lecture at the end. And I think they proved to be a pretty popular series.
An atom gets excited, it produces that effect. That's all that happens.
It shortened my life by about 3 years, I think, because there's a lot of pressure on the Christmas lecture anyway. It was obviously a wonderful experience to be doing that, given the history of what had gone before, and it's something I've never forgotten. One of my favourite demonstrations from the Christmas lectures I gave was a recreation of an experiment first done by John Tyndall in his Christmas lectures. He had someone playing a cello in the basement, and the sound from that cello was transmitted up a wooden pole into the lecture theatre, where a second cello amplified the sound, and so it appeared like the cello was playing remotely on its own. So we recreated that by using the sound from the cello in the basement to modify a laser beam, and so the laser beam came up through the floor and then was converted back into the audio sound.
Pretty horrible, but there is indeed some music there.
And so remotely, carried by light, we had this audio of the cello playing down below. And it was an exact recreation of John Tyndall's experiment transposed to modern times. Well, of course, Faraday initiated them, and Chemical History of a Candle is one of his titles. He gave them several times. The ones I first remember, really, are probably the ones George Porter gave, because he called his The History of a Sunbeam, because he was interested in photochemistry. There have been so many series which have been absolutely spectacular. I remember Carl Sagan, for example, giving ones on astronomy. It was the first time I ever heard the Earth described as the little blue dot, which was his phrase. There were some notable ones in that Eric Lathwaite, who was an engineer, he had a gyroscope, a very heavy gyroscope, balanced on the end of a pole, really wound up, travelling very fast. And that allows the weight to be taken by a young child. So he had a child from the audience carrying this heavy gyroscope. But I think the interest they engendered in the public, particularly in the UK at that time, but worldwide, it was quite unique. There was nothing like it anywhere else. Well, I have to say I'm old-fashioned in this regard. From my experience, there's nothing quite matches doing something live in front of an audience where you get an immediate reaction, immediate questions, and you can modify what you say, what you subsequently say, based on your perceived reaction to what the audience is doing. And in having to do a demonstration of a physical principle, for example, you have to really think, what is the point you're trying to get across? I never believed in doing experiments just for the point of wowing the audience. There had to be a point which the experiment would illustrate. An explosion, for example, which had been loved in this building since John Tyndall's time. They're great, they're dramatic, but they have to have relevance to what you're actually trying to say. Fortunately, I lectured mostly on chemistry, and chemistry lends itself to that kind of demonstration. So relevance is very important. You have to pick your material such that you impart new knowledge, but in a very entertaining way. And I think that was something that we did par excellence in the RI. This was the home of the demonstration lecture, and we wanted all of our lecturers to do things in front of the audience. I mean, that goes right back to Michael Faraday. The ethos of what you're trying to do hasn't changed. The mechanism by which you do it has necessarily changed. And so doing social media presentations, I think, is something we couldn't have dreamed of at the time I was here, even though it's only 40 years ago. Well, we live in a technological world, and so I think it's vitally important that all citizens, scientists and otherwise, know something about how science works, because we depend on it so strongly. Everybody at the level of politicians, of leaders of industry, to know what science can do for them and what it cannot do for them. And so that's very important from the health of a society and the well-being of a society. But there's more to it than that. Most scientists I know have led such hugely enjoyable lives, being able to do what they're passionate about. And I always wanted to be trying to be able to get that across to young people, that not only would you be doing something useful, you would have so much fun and so much enjoyment. Why would you want to do anything else? It's not a chore, it's fun. I was responsible for running a research group in the David Faraday laboratory here. I was running a successful group in Southampton, but nobody else there was doing photochemistry. And to join forces with George's group meant there were something like 30 active scientists in photochemistry working here in fairly cramped conditions, but we had really wonderful equipment, all the modern laser equipment we needed. Because of George's reputation, we had a stream of visitors coming from all over the world, who my own group in Southampton would not have met had we not been here. It was not without its disadvantages, I can tell you. This is a very old building, and it's very dusty. And anybody who's tried to tune a laser will tell you that dust on mirrors in lasers is a curse. And so my students used to have to clean their mirrors off on the lasers very often, and they always complained about it. And I used to try and comfort them by saying, well, most household dust are the dead skin cells of inhabitants or former inhabitants. And so it might just be that what you're scraping off your mirrors are the dead skin cells of Michael Faraday. And it didn't comfort them at all, in fact. But students worked very hard because they had the initiative to do it. They wanted to do it. I talk to my students from that day now, many of them in senior academic positions around the world, and they say the time they spent here doing research was the best time in their lives. And I would agree with it. I think it was a wonderful place to do research. Partly because of the history, of course. In an academic sphere, it's actually finding people who come and work for you, who you know are better scientists than you are, and then fostering their careers and seeing them blossom. It's seeing people gain enjoyment out of doing something which is quite difficult, but then they do it well and they learn the enjoyment of it. One wants to infect people with your own passion, I think, and so that's what I've tried to do all my life. Part of the unique history of the Royal Institution is the fact that 10 of the chemical elements were discovered within these 4 walls. And there's no other institution in the world for which that is true. Faraday discovered benzene in this building. In fact, everything Faraday ever did was done in this building. There are so many discoveries here which make it unique, and you actually feel that in the walls of this building. I lectured in the lecture theatre more than 110 times during the time I was here. I was fortunate enough to give the Christmas lectures once, but I gave 5 Friday evening discourses during my time. And standing outside those doors, you never lose that sense of history on your shoulders, that here the greats of British science address their audiences, and my word, what am I doing here? You know, it was the general reaction. But you're so pleased to be able to do it.